Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of All Things Money, and today we're focusing more on the tech side and away from power and everything energy that we do all the time. So we've got Ahsan Jamil, who is essentially the founder of this venture capital fund, Sai Tech.
Is that Capital.
Sai Capital. So Ahsan, how are you doing today?
Good, thank you for having me.
Ahsan, tell me, what's Sai doing?
Sai has been investing in advanced engineering, frontier technology companies that are focused on exporting in the B2B space out of Pakistan. We've been doing this for the past 2+ years, building a portfolio of companies, working with them to help them scale, grow, and compete with global tech companies. I've been in this space for, like I said, about 3 years, very focused on deploying local capital and leveraging that to go and beat global technology companies in global markets.
Yeah, so you say frontier tech companies. What do you mean the frontier tech companies?
So frontier tech companies are companies that focus on artificial intelligence, advanced data structures, cloud environments, so high value work in technology, primarily focusing in that space where our customers are global enterprises, in the Fortune 1000 space or large scale businesses who want to build either products and services and need technology resources that add high value, and we do that at very competitive costs. That's our formula.
So a lot of these companies exist locally?
A lot of them exist, but they do not all do. So a lot of software companies, for example, exist. A lot of them do very simple work, typically. So do a lot of companies who are doing frontier tech work exist? Not so many. I think most of them focus on simple work, revenue generating work. Our focus is, you go and work on advanced engineering problems that the world needs, high value problems, and try to scale that model.
All right, when you say advanced engineering problems, what do you mean by that?
So for example, this day you hear about AI all the time, right? So people want to make agents. They want to build AI agents that solve operational problems, solve strategic problems. Our companies will do that. People want to integrate AI onto cloud environments. Our companies will do that. A lot of medium enterprises in the global consuming market in this space want to build data structures that are ready or pre-AI stage. We want to build that. So it's problems that the rest of the world is dealing with in technology. We want to solve those.
So how does your investment process look like?
So our investment process starts with a long due diligence, which as most VCs and
So I'll just take a step back.
Sure.
Before you even do due diligence, you have to really identify. You maybe have to look through a top-down lens or bottom-up lens.
Mm-hmm.
How does that process work?
So I look for a few things, right? So if you ask me, what are the 2 or 3 things? So number one is very common across all types of young companies and startups, which is the founders. We spend time with them, and there are attributes that we look for within the founders. In our case, we really like founders who are very technology strategy focused. They understand tech. So in the team of founders, we want to have people who understand business, and we want to have people who understand tech, are driving technology strategy. They can't be resources for hire. Post that founder analysis, then we look at company fundamentals. Because we're deploying local capital, we want to build great IT businesses. And that means companies should have a little bit of a track record and history. They should be able to show profitability, that they're able to run and a decent business.
But if it's in frontier tech, my understanding is obviously they won't have any track record because frontier tech keeps on changing because as the frontier keeps on expanding. So how do you work with this problem?
Great question, right? So each company has a layer of developers, solution architects, and different layers. So as part of our process, as we're evaluating companies and we go past the founder's good, the company's good, I and my team spend time with them. So we will test their acumen in terms of how technology abstraction, how can they do technology abstraction? What are the actual skills they have? Can they design solutions to complex problems? We'll have a slew of use cases we'll discuss with them. So that's the process we go through, because when they have that good layer, then we know that even if tech changes, they have the ability, the institutional ability to change with it. And obviously our companies are young, they're startups, so there are always gaps. Some gaps are non-negotiable. If they exist, then we don't invest. Others we obviously help and bridge, org structures, market accesses, delivery structures. We do all of that because we want our portfolio of companies to work with the best enterprises in the world to help solve problems through technology.
So is profit a metric that you would look at?
It is. It is a metric we look at because we want to build great IT companies. And so if you have a record of operating for a couple of years, even if you did not solve the most complex problems yet, you need to be able to run a good business. Now, we're not expecting 50% profitability or higher, but you have to know, we need to understand that the founders are not just in the process of scale without good business sense. So we look for that.
All right, so you're looking at profit from the get-go. It's not something like cash burn. And
No. Because frontier technology companies, B2B space, a global company comes, Coca-Cola comes and says, hey, I want to build the agents that do blah, right? That's the world we operate in. So these large enterprises need solid companies to.
So what value do you add to the companies that you invest in?
Yeah, so beyond capital, our model is very similar to what I think the US model was back in the 60s and 80s, right? Between that phase. And what that means is that capital is just one of 10 things these companies need. It's essential, it's necessary, but there are 9 other things that the companies need. In our space, the market we want to capture, our companies need to understand how to develop the organization as a tech company. Because we want them to compete with the Infosys, the TCS, the systems of the world, right? Like that's the market we're in. So we'll go in and we'll analyze their organization, we help them restructure that. We look at their talent, we look at the technology skills they have and what they need to bridge there. We look at delivery really closely because the clients they work with, their iterative cycles with those clients that they must understand, definitions of quality they must understand. Because the clients that our companies work with are not going to come and just tell you, hey, write this code. We want them to come and tell problems to our companies and let our companies find solutions and deliver on them, scale them, iterate through them. Our projects our companies do are long projects. They're not 2 weeks, 4 weeks. These are years of engagements. So in order to be in that space, you need to be a very high value addition organization. So we look at what they do today versus what their competitors are doing globally, and all aspects from org, solutioning, architecture layers, delivery, we look at everything. And then we have a process to help them.
So how many companies have you Sai invested in already?
We have 5 investments, 2 in the startup space and 3 in the IT export space. Majority of our investments in terms of capital has gone to the IT export side. And then we have 2 startups.
And when we talk about IT exports, what are we really exporting?
High value solutions. So we're not exporting the ability to tell us how many lines of code. We're exporting solutions. Solutions at great value, by the way, because cost basis is an advantage for us. But if that cost advantage is just used to give low value work, it makes no sense. It's really beneficial when you take a cost advantage when you're 30-40% cheaper than a competitor and you're adding the same amount of value. And the companies that work with our portfolio of companies, they don't do small engagement, it adds up. That's when it becomes really exciting for both the clients of our companies, for our company's growth, and us as investors.
How many such companies exist in Pakistan which are doing really high value exports?
Very few. Like if I measured them, if you're doing high value exports, then I would assume you're doing at least $1 million or plus minimum, right? 90% of the companies in this space are doing less than $500,000. 80% are doing less than 100,000. Because these companies became used to, we're a low-cost country, right? So even when you do 100,000, their profitability becomes decent.
Yeah.
So they try to replicate a low-value chain and sort of expand on that. But in reality, if anybody understood AI 5 years ago and where it was going, there should have been alarm bells that this is not the direction you want to go because we will eliminate that type of work, naturally. Now, startups in the US who are going to write MVPs are not coming to low-cost centers to build those MVPs. They will have tools to do that now, right? So that market is going to reduce over time. But if you're going to a Fortune 1000 company that's competing with competitors and need to build advanced tech, they have legacy systems, their tech ecosystem is very complex. That work, AI just can't do today. 10 years from now, I don't know. Today, they're not. They need to go to big tech players who understand their world. That's the model that I think as a macro economy, tech export economy, we should have focused on. And we
So how do we focus on that? How do we increase that number of, let's say, high value exports or entities that focus on high value export and we just like sift away all the low value stuff?
Yeah, so it's a transition, right? It's not something they can switch over. I think what we control or what tech companies control internally is structuring their organization to hire and build more solution architects. The talent that comes in, if it just knows how to write code and not solve global enterprise problems, they're not going to add a lot of value. Even if they do today, 1 year from now, they won't. So organizations should focus on what they control. They control how they develop their people. They control how they design solutions. They control how they convey those solutions to global, large enterprise clients. They have to build that entire culture. Investors obviously come in, should help them understand what that means and give them capital so that they can make that internal transition. Once that transition is happening, Ammar, I tell you, the sales become much easier.
Yeah.
A lot of companies here have, when we meet in our pipeline, right? They'll come and say, hey, Ahsan, we have all these things. In a brief comment, we just need market access. And I'm telling you, from a client perspective, because I've been a client of these companies, they're not ready. I cannot throw them an abstracted problem that I want to solve or a goal I want to achieve, and they come up with the type of solution that is implementable that I buy it. They just don't. People make the mistake that we just need market access, when in reality, I think our tech companies should really have an honest look internally on how they need to restructure first inwards. They can be small, but they have to be competitive with global players. The clients will come, because when you do that and you're adding high amount of value and you add in cost advantages that we do have, it truly becomes a win-win.
So two things here. How do you restructure internally? Isn't that a resource problem? The question is in two parts. Is human capital a problem? And B, is retaining high value human capital a problem? Because I would think for high quality human capital, the market equilibrium wage would largely be the same globally, because it's pretty easy for anyone in tech to work for someone else or do multiple gigs at the same time and get a higher income. So the cost advantage there disappears. So how does that work out? A, do we really have that high quality human capital? And B, how does cost advantage works when such human capital can simply switch to, let's say, another company, another gig, and get paid better?
So there are three questions in your embedded question. The first is, how do we go about it? Well, it starts with the CEOs and the leadership of our tech company understanding the need that if they want to be global IT export winners, they need to first work with us and understand what that organization looks like. Does it need to be very coder heavy? Does it need to be QA heavy? What type of delivery gaps there? They have to design the organization first, that the leadership, because as investors, we're not there on the day-to-day basis. The leadership of that company, the C-suite of that company must understand, ask questions, and get through that process with us. Once they understand, the second problem becomes, how do you upskill the talent that you have to be more solution-oriented? You're taking people who are used to tell me what code to write to now say, here's a problem, the code is the last step, walk us through how you're going to solve this problem. That requires time. That institutionalization of solution architecture mindset takes time. And when we are doing due diligence of our company, you asked earlier, Ammar, we look at their ability to upskill. Do they, whatever upskilling we have to do they do that? Because the market, the colleges and universities aren't giving enough students, in my opinion, who are ready to work on global problems.
So that is the question I was alluding to.
Yeah, and I was
do we have a sufficient pipeline? Because I feel it's a pipeline problem more than anything else. We're not generating enough quality human capital to work on the more abstracted and high quality problems that you're talking about. Yeah. We are, let's say, producing human capital, which is still stuck in that low value rut or low value chain. How do you change this equation?
So today, it's not an exasperating problem because our market share globally is very small.
But you've got to increase this market share.
Yeah, you've got to increase it. So we need more institutions in Pakistan who are ready to be risky and take their current curriculums and methods and throw them out and be more forward-looking. One of our companies is engaging with the government of Pakistan to help them design what AI foundational sort of knowledge and upskilling looks like. But we are not there yet. Today, our company will go, our country or our companies will go from 15 million ARR to 20. We don't have a problem today. We have the ability to scale at that speed. But if you were going to really capture market share, it is a problem. For that, we need foundational talent development to get better. So good universities do need to revamp their curriculums, they do need to have a lot more practical exercises. They need to connect industry problems to our sort of theoretical.
So that's what I was saying when you said, you need to have a 10-year view. You need to have a 5-year view, 10-year view. Right. If you just keep having a 6-month view or a 12-month view, you will continue to be stuck in this low-value trap, I would call it. Correct. So let's say we take a 10-year view and we say that IT exports should ideally be $20 billion. I do not see a problem with that. I mean, again, the good thing about tech is it's just scalable. You can have like a team of 10 people doing the same thing and generate massive exports if you've got the right set of talent. So let's say you want to target something like, let's say $30 billion of IT exports in the next 10 years. What fundamental changes do you think need to be done in order to actually hit that goal?
So let's start with policy at the most macro level. I think that IT policy at the government level needs to be focused on positioning IT advanced engineering companies to succeed with global clients. Like that goal has to be centric, and we are working with the IT ministry to help find solutions on how to get there.
But my thing here is, why do we always need the government, always need the state to intervene, always need a ministry to intervene to set policy? I mean, why does something need to be top down? Why can't it be bottom up? I mean, top down, it makes sense. Okay, if the government has to provide certain A, B, C level infrastructure. So if you say, I want to transport goods from point A to point B, you would need some road network or you would need railway network for that. But if you want to hit, let's say, $20 billion in exports, and that's purely human talent dependent, why do you need the state to intervene here?
We don't need the state. It helps, though, from tax purposes, right? For example, if you ask me what is the formula to capture $30 billion of IT global, exports, which is the goal that you positioned it. Well, number one, you need local capital to be in play. So we started that because without local capital, you do not scale.
So on that as well, I am a strong believer in capital actually being agnostic. Yes. And gravitating towards wherever it gets a higher return.
Yep.
So where does the state come into play here again?
No, state doesn't come into play. So when you ask the question, how do we get to 30 billion, right? So there are components. There are the IT companies, what they need to do. There's policy, and then there's obviously stakeholders.
Yeah.
I think all three layers have a responsibility or an objective to achieve and play a role in this thing. Yeah. So I picked IT policy as not the thing that needs to change, but just as a starting point in the conversation, right? Because what policy does is it makes sure you have advantages and it incentivizes you going in a certain direction. So if you are, for example, in policy, really helping freelancers and focusing on them, but not helping these companies who want to do advanced engineering, guess where the talent is.
But what help can the government provide to those who
is a great example, right? Like if you're doing freelancing, the tax advantages as a freelancer are far more. So if you're a good technologist and you're freelancing, and let's say you're making $1 million a month, right? Really happy, good, thing when you compare to other per capita income. That same talent should, if it goes to an IT company, should not be taxed more.
See, that's the thing. I mean, tax distortion will it exists everywhere, right? For example, if you're a salaried employee, you get taxed at like 35%, whatever, at the highest rate. And if you're in agriculture, you don't. But that doesn't mean everyone just starts going into agriculture.
Correct.
Again, where, how, and if you're a freelancer, there's just so much you can do. But what we're talking about are really high value add stuff, which as a freelancer, you can never do.
Yes, and so we have to, policies in general have to incentivize doing high value work. General, whether it's tax or other.
That I agree.
That is my fundamental point. Now, balancing tax, like the agriculture example you gave, obviously in communication with the government, people in finance will run through those scenarios. But generally, the sentiment should be that we are going to incentivize you, as in tech companies, to do high value work. And we are going to give you whatever we can so that you are gravitated to work.
So what can the government give? What can a policy give?
Well, one, the tax policy we talked about. The other is the engagement of global enterprises. So we need to get global enterprises to pay more attention to our tech companies, right? The basic stuff happens, these fairs, these conferences happen, right? But they're too basic. I'll give you our example. In Sai, we intend in the US market to provide a very comprehensive package to global enterprises to come engage with us, because our pricing is already low. And we're going to start adding a lot more value add. The government wants to help any way they can to incentivize those companies to come here. But those global enterprises need to be given attention to come here, not just the small guys who want to spend $100,000. We want millions of dollars of people, contracts to come to Pakistan, and they'll come, but you have to pay attention to them, right? You can't just say, you can't measure success by if a company is doing $10 million of business but has got 1,000 clients. You want a company that does $10 million of business a year but has 10 clients. That's the mindset that we need to have.
Again, my question then there is, tech is scalable, and if there's high quality tech, it's not a commodity like, let's say, textile or something like cloth, where it's a commoditized product and you have to hold an exhibition for that, and you have to do the whole drama for that and be the lowest cost player out there. TK, when you're doing in tech, it's the value that you sell rather than the price that you sell. So why do we need that horse and cattle show to really put ourselves forward? Why can't local private enterprises evolve to that level where they can just directly reach out? Why do we need that whole festival thing and so on?
Yeah, so we don't, right? So the second component, large enterprise in the world don't go to those horse and cattle shows.
Exactly,
right?
yes.
You're right. So let's come to the second layer, which is what do the IT companies do themselves? One, they need to really restructure their own processes of delivery. I think that is so extremely undervalued, and most IT companies here don't know what that looks like, because they've always worked with clients or come from an exposure state that they've not worked in the Fortune 1000. They don't understand what that high value work delivery looks like, and that's something they control. That's not something that needs outside help. That's an inward looking, restructuring, I'm going to get better mindset. And that's the component that they need to do. What investors need to do, what other stakeholders need to do, is wherever that exposure gap exists, we need to come and fill that. So if we go to a young company of 50 people today, right, led by, say, a 26, 27-year-old founder who's really passionate about tech, understands advanced engineering, that person does not understand what delivery looks like for a Fortune 1000 company. They just don't, right? So as a stakeholder, as an investor, it is our job to go in and build them to understand that world, so that when they are reaching out in a typical business development marketing cycle to these larger companies and positioning themselves, when they get a call to say, hey, Ammar, come in, we want to talk to you, you've got some great engineering skill, and I know that you guys are from Pakistan, so we are looking for a good solution, walk us through this, here's our problem. These guys should not just come in and say, oh, here's an abstracted AI solution. They should be able to talk about delivery, repeatability. These things don't exist here.
So it's a leadership problem.
Leadership,
At that
institutionalization.
institutional level.
Institutionalization problem of delivery.
So how do you solve this?
Exposure is the number one way we come in, because there has to be a starting point. And then once they break through the first client and they deliver on that promise, then it starts to become easy, because they become referrals for you. The next client is like, oh, you've done this for Coca-Cola, or you've done this for Walmart? Great. We now know here's our problem. Can you do this for us as well? Because pricing advantage is always coming with us, right? The cost advantage is always with us. But that establishing that we can do that at value, the first one is very hard. The first two are very hard. Once you get to the first two, then it starts to become easy. Then you have a track record, and in that space of the Fortune 1000, Fortune 100,000 space, the big enterprises, they go on referrals. They're not going to horse and cattle shows, right? They're going and saying, oh, you've done this for this person? We know you can. We know we don't have to explain the complexity of our environment to you. You're going to come in and take a solution, and you're going to integrate this in our complex environment, which is built of legacy systems and whatnot. So the first one's hard. After that, it starts to become.
So what I'm hearing here is essentially you need institutional leadership that understands how all of this works, and that has gone through some, I would say, layers of evolution to get to that stage. How do we get there?
It's not. So that's what as in our example, that's a chicken and an egg problem, right? Like, how do you get there when you don't have it? They don't. That's what, as investors, we bring to the table. So if our company today has not had that, and we have that, we bring that to them to bridge the gap. So when our company goes to a Fortune 100 company and says, we can do this, we are in the leadership. I will have those conversations on the opposite end, because those battle scars exist with us, right? Now we take that learning and we institutionalize it, we apply it to the first breakthrough they will have, and once they've had that, then their own institutionalization starts to begin organically. The initial part, we have to bring it in because there's no way, it's a chicken and egg problem. Like how, you want me to be having that exposure and experience before I give you, as a client, I give you work, but who's going to give you work first?
Yeah.
So once we invest capital with them, we bring all those learnings. So when they go represent themselves to a prospective client, they come off as a more seasoned advanced engineering company. And then once they deliver on the first few clients, then the cycle starts to become sort of grows itself. They become better. And I tell you, Ammar, once you do high value work at scale, it is addictive.
Yeah.
The game becomes not about dollars and margins, revenue and margin. It really, and it makes us really
It's about
happy.
pushing the frontier at this point, as you said
because we have
earlier.
these young leaders in our portfolio as an example. When they taste that type of success, they don't want to do simple work.
Yeah.
They are hunting for more
For
complex
better work, yeah, that's right.
And
So coming back to the final part of the embedded question,
Yes.
how do you develop that robust pipeline of, let's say, individuals, graduates? I won't even say graduate, it's a word for the last century at this point. How do you develop that pipeline of high quality human capital?
I think the private sector, the institutions who are focused on technology, there are two layers to it. One, they come in organizations, and one before they come into tech organizations. So let's talk about before they come into the tech organization as a macro. I think everybody needs to take a very, very hard and urgent look on what AI, as an example of advanced technology, what that is looking like. Today, if you go to universities and you go to their computer science departments and IT departments, they're not progressing fast enough. They have got access to tools that are AI, but they're not progressing fast enough on the fundamental technology thinking because it's evolving really quickly. So they at a macro need to have that inward look on how do we get better. The thing we obviously focus more on is when these people with a good foundation come into our organizations. There the upskilling is really on solutioning. We are gravitating away from writing code, but really doing a lot of use cases with our younger associates with complex problems. We'll have rooms of whiteboards where they will sit all day and walk us through their thought process, because that's how we understand how far they are from being just a coder that wants to do low value work versus being a problem solver. Today, if our company does $10 million with 200 people, we want them to go to 20 million, but we're not with 400 people, right? They have to be efficient because tools are going to do some of the simple work. They have to be high value addition work. So the macro institutions need to step up. Higher Education Commission needs to take a very serious look at this on what AI curriculums look like. The IT companies themselves, when they bring in associates, they need to invest a lot more in them because they need to teach them how to solve complex problems, and that's not a 2-week training program of writing code. That is with them to give them business problems, industry problems, sit in, whiteboard, create an environment where solutioning happens, where iterative solutioning happens. Because once those guys and those associates come out from that internal growth, they become really, really quickly engaged and be able to put in front of clients and say, hey, these guys are there going to solve problems. So it's a two-tiered approach, no quick way.
Sounds good, sounds good. All right, so Ahsan, how does exit look like for your group companies?
We have multiple avenues of exit, thankfully, because our companies are profitable. The most exciting one, obviously, is the IPO. We plan on doing our first one, inshallah, next year. And so that's the more obvious, where the market gets access to it. But in our case, because our companies are profitable, we create avenues of dividends and typical private equity exit options as well. So we have then mergers and acquisitions, of course, because our companies are young and small. So we know larger companies are interested to come work with them, especially when they are focused on frontier technology and have a track record of clients. So we have multiple options versus just one or two. We'll see how sort of they keep growing. Right now, we're just happy on their profitable growth. And so I think by next year, those conversations of exits will start happening.
Sounds good. I think it's a great conversation, Ahsan.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for your time and for a very good primer on how abstract thought in tech, high value tech works and what really needs to be done to get to the next stage.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ahsan. All right, guys. This is it for this week's episode of All Things Money. It was more about how we can actually move towards more IT exports, more high-value IT exports, rather than just getting stuck in the low-value trap. This is it for this week. Till next time. Thank you and goodbye.